Music in high school. I really had done nothing before my sophomore year, and some friends talked me into joining choir, and I reluctantly said, sure, why not? There are a lot of girls in choir. It seems like something cool. I like to sing. So I did it, and I fell in love with music immediately. I couldn't believe I had not been doing it my entire life. I started taking piano lessons, voice lessons, saxophone lessons, and I really never looked back from there. I had a truly inspirational choir director in high school. Her name was Allison Crossman. This was in Lilburn, Georgia, which is a suburb of Atlanta. And she really instilled in me a passion for music, vocal music in general. And I think that's, if it hadn't been for her, I wouldn't be doing this today. Here at Briarcrest, we have curricular choirs from elementary school all the way through high school, and I think that's one of the unique things that we're able to offer. We have all of those choirs that meet in the same choir room, and I get to work alongside my fellow vocal music teachers here at Briarcrest and work with the students from the time they're in second grade all the way until they graduate from my program in the high school. I teach a few high school choral classes. We do gender-separated choirs because we really believe that that's the best for developing the unique voices of teenage boys and girls. And then we have One Voice, which is the a cappella group, and they're also required to be in one of the curricular choral classes so that they get the traditional choral and vocal background and training. And I think that's a huge part of their success. The facilities that we have here the main facility is a brand new 35,000 square foot performing arts center that I was a part of designing with a whole team of people here at Briarcrest for a very long time. And then we were able to launch that project a few years ago. It opened 2 years ago, and we've been enjoying it ever since. We have a choral rehearsal studio that has a room for about 120 singers. We have a dance studio. We have a 1,000 square foot, a 1,000 seat auditorium, and we've got about $1 million of audiovisual equipment in there, which leads to a lot of possibilities, especially with things like the a cappella group on sound. And so the facilities, I mean, they are great, and they, of course, help us make our videos and help us reach audiences in the best way possible. But as I always tell people, if you give me singers and a barn, I can still make them sing, and we can still make great music. So the facilities are a wonderful blessing, and we are really appreciative to have them. But the heart of what we do are the teachers and the students. So I use two different processes for composition and then for arranging. For composition, I usually start with the text. If somebody's commissioning a new work, or if I have something from a publisher and they say, okay, I know we want to set this text, that helps me. That narrows down the possibility for me. It's way easier to start with that than it is for someone to say, JD, we want you to write a piece. And I'm like, great. Give me some confines. Stravinsky talked about how confines are keeping the more controlled, the more free you are. And I truly embrace that concept. I want to have a lot of confines so that I have to be creative to make something musical happen. But once I start from the text, that gives me the ideas to use. And I'll occasionally work things out in my head. I'll go to the piano. I'll work some at the piano. I'll go away from it. And then finally, once I start to piece the ideas together, it's only at that time that I'll sit down and actually write the music. I usually use Finale or some kind of engraving program, but I don't like to write it down too soon because it makes it seem too final, and I think it limits the creative process. So, I'll work really organically. I'll record things on my phone. Oh, that's a really interesting chord progression. I'll record it on my phone. Sometimes I'll even record video so that I remember what the fingerings I used for a particular piano passage, things like that. But it's not till the very end of a compositional process that I'll actually go and write it down and say, here's the final product. Now for arranging, I do something completely different. And I learned this process from Rob Dietz, who is a friend of mine, and he is a really talented arranger. He lives in Los Angeles, and he worked on the Sing-Off for all the seasons of the Sing-Off alongside Ben Bram and some other really great folks. And they started using this method by which you sing the parts as you come up with them. And so the first step is cutting the original song down into whatever form you want it to be. So the form is first. If the song is really long, maybe there's like a 30-second instrumental interlude or a guitar solo. I mean, those things sometimes can be really tough to cover unless you're doing a vocal jazz chart and you want to throw in 16 bars of improv or something like that. But you'll make your cuts. And then once you do that, you take the original studio version, you lay it into a program called Melodyne, which is what a lot of people use to edit not only vocals but other instruments. And then you start to come up with ideas just organically. You know, what do you want to do with the song? And you start singing it out. And you know, when I watched Rob Dietz do this, he came to Memphis about a month ago and was in residency with us and would come and work with the a cappella group during the day. And then we would go back to my studio and we would work on ideas and arrange new stuff. And then we'd take that material the next day back to the group and see if that worked. And by watching him do that, it really helped me hone my own craft in arranging. And I find that you come up with things when you're singing the parts that aren't as restrictive as when you're looking at quarter notes and half notes on the page and you feel more confined to those things. You'll make up new sounds, you'll make up new rhythmic ideas, new harmonic concepts. Just, it's a little more freeing.
You mentioned an application called Melodyne. Could you expand upon that? I've never heard of.
Melodyne is a
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. I think it.
Okay, go ahead.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
Melodyne is a program that is used by a lot of audio professionals, and it's also used by amateurs who are making their own albums. And it's basically pitch and time correction software. It's very similar to Auto-Tune, which has been a plugin, has been around for a long time, but they have a studio version of Melodyne through which you can record yourself, and it immediately puts your singing into different tracks, and you can see your parts out on this graph, and the graph shows what you're singing not only by pitch but also in time. And it's really helpful for arranging because once you do all of that, you're singing in parts, you can go in and quantize or clean up the parts that you just sang, and then you can export those parts after you make your arrangement. You can export those parts as a MIDI file into Finale, do a little bit of cleanup work, but then you also already have your written chart ready to go. So it's almost like a reverse process from what I was used to and what a lot of people, I think, still do. But I have been really impressed by the product that you can get from it. Another advantage of using something like Melodyne to do your arrangements is that you have ready-made practice tracks for your singers. You can immediately have a demo of what it sounds like. And so, especially for songs that have a really intricate or different groove and feel to them, it's helpful to demonstrate that, and the students can listen to it so that every time they're practicing along with it, they're singing with appropriate tone and style and groove and rhythm and things like that. I think so. The sound concept for One Voice is a full, clean pop sound that is vocal by nature. We aren't trying to do too much that is, we emulate instruments, but we're not trying to make it not sound human, if that makes sense. We want it to be fully vocal, we want it to be fully human, but at the same time, we want to invoke the ideas that these instruments have and the roles that these instruments play in the ensemble. So sometimes if we're doing a chart that has sort of a soul R&B style to it, we'll have three people who are on horn parts, and that's how we'll write the horn parts in. And the sound says horn sound, and so you'll have a trio on horn, and then another trio might be on keys, and another trio might be on backing vocals. And so that gives a little bit of an idea of sort of the orchestration that we're going to use and the sound concept for that particular song. Other songs that we may do may be more vocal in nature, but I would say that we don't go completely choral. We don't, adopt a completely choral traditional classical sound. The tonal concept is full, healthy singing. We don't really talk much about vibrato. We don't try to force the students to sing straight tone, but at the same time, most pop music doesn't use a ton of vibrato, for instance. So we try to hone the healthy general singing concept that we have and tweak it depending on what the style of the song that we're covering is. I am not a staff writer with Alfred, but I do have an arrangement with them that was just published a few months ago. The person that's their editor for pop music, his name is Michael Spresser. He's a wonderful guy, and he and I met a few years ago at a convention and have had an ongoing dialogue about our nonprofit, which is the Acapella Education Association. He's been very supportive of that and a lot of educational acapella opportunities. And so it was through those endeavors that Michael and I formed a relationship. And pop licensing is so convoluted and tricky that certain publishers have print rights to certain songs and certain artists and certain publishing houses. So I had an arrangement of My Immortal from I think 5 years ago that we did with One Voice, and Michael approached me and he said, "Hey, would you like to publish this? We have the rights for it, and I think that it would do really well. I think it's accessible for a lot of groups, and that they would like it." And another benefit was that we had recorded it, so by recording it, that gives them a demo to use when they're trying to sell that piece to other teachers and other groups.
Okay. I think it was on Ben Brandt's site. I'm interviewing him next Monday. But are you familiar with Louder at all?
With what?
Louder, L-O-U-D-R.
Yes, we are. So Ben is also a friend, and Ben has written for One Voice for quite some time. Really talented guy who is best probably known now for his arrangements with Pentatonics. He works really closely with them and won a Grammy with them. We do use Louder. Louder, it's spelled L-O-U-D-R, and I believe the website's louder.fm. And Louder is it's a company that allows you to license and digitally distribute your songs online. And we started using them 4 years ago. And before that, we had used more traditional means like Harry Fox, song file. But what they do is they just streamline the process for you. You don't have to go look up the original writers and the publishers. You just use their system and you tell them, here are the things that we're singing, here are the arrangements, here's the recordings, and they automatically will license those pieces for you. They will distribute them to whatever digital media you'd like, including iTunes. They have their own online store as well on their Louder site. They can get you on Pandora and Spotify and all kinds of places. So by using Louder, it has actually turned into a really nice source of passive income for the group, and our songs have been purchased and streamed by people all over the world, which is, I think, pretty neat for a high school a cappella group. Well, the straightforward and probably most honest answer to what is the future of vocal music is this contemporary a cappella phenomenon. It's not a quick niche type of thing. It's something that is in thousands of school choral programs now, and I think it's really latched on for a couple of reasons. Number one, it uses source material that students know and like and think is cool in pop music. So that breaks down a barrier between students and the music. And the second thing I think that makes it so successful and so popular for choral directors is that it's hard. I mean, to do a cappella well, you have to sing really well. You have to sing really independently. You have to hold your own part. You have to sing in tune. You have to blend. You have to balance. You have to use style. I mean, all of these things that we try to teach every day, and it forces that on individual musicians. So I think that's a huge part of the future of vocal music. Getting more specific within the a cappella niche, I think that looping and related media is a big part of what you're going to start seeing happen. There was a group called A Squared that was on, I think, the second to last season of the Sing Off, and they came to a cappella camp called Camp Acapella this summer, and one of their members brought all of these crazy tools, looping pedals and these pads that had all these buttons on it that allowed you to record vocal things and then manipulate them. And the kids just thought it was fascinating, and it is fascinating. It's terribly creative, and a few of my students really got into it, and now they have looping stations, and it's really one of the national standards that we're supposed to be teaching as music teachers is composition, and that's so hard to teach, especially in the classroom ensemble setting. And so when you look at things like looping, I find that my students are able to compose at a really fast rate. And they're doing things that are amazing and just impress me all the time because you get such immediate feedback from doing the kind of looping that they're doing. So I do see that as another big part of the future of vocal music. Now at the collegiate level, you asked, what are college music programs missing? Well, two things. Number one, they're missing in a lot of schools, a curricular connection to their a cappella groups. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of collegiate a cappella groups, and they've been around forever. It's a long tradition, far longer than having a cappella groups in high schools. And so these groups are just formed by students, and they're led by students, and they're wonderful, and there's some of them that are doing tremendous work. But I've seen a few programs where they have somehow integrated with the choral program, and they get some guidance from TAs or choral professionals, and that guidance really takes what they're doing to the next level. And so I'm seeing that trend happen more and more around the country where the students are being aided by somebody who's just trained in choral and vocal music to help guide them. And so I hope that trend continues because the groups that I'm seeing that have faculty directors or at least faculty advisors are the ones that are making the best music. That's not a tried and true rule, but from what I've seen, that tends to be the case, which should make sense. The other thing that I think that college music programs could adapt more of is just their acceptance of music technology, especially in the rehearsal. Teachers have so many pressures on us these days to evaluate students in an individual way, and most students who do music in schools are doing them in ensembles. And if we're supposed to show growth, how are we supposed to do that when we have them all in one place? One of the things that we're doing, and I've seen some other people do as well, is we use iPads at a 1-to-1 ratio, and we can sing in our group ensembles and record students, and you'll get 90% of the student and 10% of the rest of the ensemble. So you can track individual growth on, like, say, a 16-bar phrase of a piece, and you can see where somebody goes from week 1 to week 9. And I mean, that it transforms the way that teachers are able to assess where students are. Something else that it allows people to do is get instant feedback. Sometimes students don't hear what they're doing, especially when other people are singing around them. So sometimes in rehearsals, I'll stop them and say, okay, do that again and record yourselves. They record themselves, then they listen. And then I have them give themselves feedback or tell me some things that you heard. And it's fascinating the things that they hear that they didn't know before. You can give homework with it. You can say, okay, go home and record yourself, listen to it, then record it again and send it to me. And then that starts a dialogue. And I think that's so important for students not only to be performing and singing, which we've been doing forever, but to also be critical thinkers and critical listeners of what they're doing themselves. And I think that's a component that's been missing. And I think colleges are going to need to, at some level, at least look at what the teachers that they're sending out to be in the choral programs, what are the things that they're going to be doing with evaluations, and what tools can they use like that to help. So the first thing that you have to check out if you're into contemporary a cappella music of any kind is this nonprofit that a few educators and I started a few years ago called the A Cappella Education Association. You can go to their website, which I think we'll be able to link through here. It's www.acappellaeducators.org, and there are tons of free resources. We have a bunch of regional events that expand every single year. Lots of things for teachers to come and use for free. We have our free arrangements, free recording guides, all kinds of things for people to use. And then we have a national convention that will be held in Memphis. It'll be April 22nd and 23rd. Our headlining act this year are the Swingles, which I think most people have heard of. We're really excited to have the Swingles. They're going to be phenomenal. Not only are they going to be performing for the event, but they're also going to be workshopping and clinicking groups. So I think that's just a really unique opportunity to have your group clinic with the Swingles. Then the other thing that you should definitely check out is Camp A Cappella. I took my group last year to camp. I took One Voice, my group, and they were transformed by the experience. It's a week-long, intensive, yet fun experience where kids from all over the country and even beyond, I think that there have been people from Puerto Rico and Canada, they come and they sing. And it's not even just for students. There's an adult track and there's a music educators track. And you sing in small groups, you sing in a big group, sort of like the opening to sing-off. It's run by Deke Sharon, who most people know, the godfather of contemporary a cappella, and Brody McDonald, who's the award-winning author of A Cappella Pop. His group, 11th Hour, was the first high school group that was on the Sing-Off a few years ago, and they're amazing. So Camp A Cappella, there's nothing out there like it. There's no audition to get in. It's just a really wonderful, really well-done camp that if you love to sing and you want to have a week of really having fun and meeting people from all over the country, phenomenal experience. Cannot recommend it enough. One of the things that I think I do a little bit differently with my a cappella group One Voice is the way that we rehearse. For a long time, we did what I think most groups do, and we'll get a new chart, we'll get around the piano, and we will audition a soloist, voice the piece, we will bang out parts of the piano until we get it sounding good. But for me, that was just so exhausting, and a month was a long time to learn a contemporary a cappella piece, especially when there's a lot of repetition. There are a lot of really individual parts that make it really hard to play on the piano. So one of the things that Melodyne and making a recorded version of your a cappella arrangement does for you is it allows you to have a practice track. So our process now is in a 5-day cycle. Day one, I've already auditioned the soloists and I have already voiced the piece. So if you aren't able to do that digitally, we do everything like that digitally. The kids will send me recordings of them. Sometimes we'll do it in person, but usually day one we have all that in place. We'll meet, we'll listen to the demo track that we've done one time through and just make sure everybody understands, doesn't have any questions about the piece. And then they take their sheet music and they take their practice track and they go to different parts of the auditorium. And they practice for about 45 minutes and it sounds like utter chaos and very unmusical cacophony of sounds as they're all practicing their different parts. They have earbuds in, and they're all looking at their sheet music and practicing. And then day 2, they come back. They've practiced at home if there are parts that are still tough for them. And I'll cycle through. I'll work with different sections. So if the tenor and baritone parts are homophonic a lot, I'll bring both of those parts in together and we'll work those parts. And then I'll cycle in the sopranos and then maybe the altos. And then once we've done that, and I've had a lot of individual work with sections, we'll have the whole group come together on the end of day 2 and we'll sing through the piece once. If it's really hard, maybe I'll sing through it with the demo. But by that time, notes and rhythms are pretty much in place. If they're not, day 2, I have them go home and record the parts. And they, by recording it and them knowing that I'm going to listen to them sing by themselves, they make sure that they have it pretty accurately learned. So that pushes us really quickly. Day 3, we start to hit all of the musical intricacies, the articulations, the dynamics, the phrasing, the style, and that's really, to me, really important because the concept of repeated readings, right, that every time you do something, it gets a little bit more ingrained into the way that you do it, really colors the way that I approach this. So I want to get to those musical elements as early on in the learning process as possible so that bad habits don't get ingrained into the singers. And so day 3, we're already learning all of these things about phrasing and dynamics. By day 4, we can sing the piece all the way through, and it usually sounds pretty good. We'll approach, if we do any kind of movement with it, we'll do some kind of movement staging. If we have a changing of soloists, things like that, we'll work that out. And then we'll also address emotion, which is something I think is really overlooked in vocal music in particular, is the role of emotion, especially when we're trying to tell a story to an audience. So we'll talk about emotion, and we have a really specific process that we use to talk about emotion and to make an emotional connection as singers that will translate to the audience. And then on day 5, which if we have every day of the week and there are no interruptions, that'll be Monday through Friday. On Friday, we will tweak some more, and then we'll do a public performance of that piece. We will sing it out in the lobby of the school. We will go around to classrooms, and by doing that, we get a little bit of performance pressure, and but it's still safe. It's a safe environment, and we can make mistakes. If something happens, it's no big deal. You laugh it off and move on. But that's how we take a piece from its nascence as just a piece of sheet music and maybe a demo recording to pretty finished product ready to sing.